Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the latest edition of FreeThought Hour. Now, I'm not sure whether my co-host Tercia is available at the moment because I think she's just gone. Oh, wait a minute. No, she's getting herself organized. I can see she's whirling around. The camera's pointing everywhere. Oh, we got a good view up her nostril then for a moment. And now I can see the top of her head. Sort yourself out, woman. Okay. Here she is. Hello, Tercia. Oh, I'm on upside down. Listen, you don't have to go Australian on me.
Well, are you telling me the globe is round? The globe is round?
Well, I don't want to go there at the moment. No, certainly not. So how are you?
You know, John, I told you that I've discovered from the start that I'm actually a heathen and I'm a primitive monster because I love rugby. And we were watching the France-Scotland game at my dad's. And I said, I have to go home now because I have to broadcast. So if that's not dedication for you, then I absolutely don't know what dedication is. So I'm here and we have electricity and I'm not watching rugby, although I do have to confess that one of these days it'll be World Cup. And yeah, I don't know, that's going to be bad because I'm going to watch rugby.
Well, I've done it on my own before, and so have you. Come to that, so it doesn't really cause a disaster. But I've got some bad news for you because if you think you're broadcasting, let me tell you, our audience at the moment is 0.
Oh dear! Oh no, that's terrible.
This is not even narrow casting. It's nil casting. Anyway, we do have a guest, and of course, most of our viewers come afterwards. People like to podcast these days, don't they? They don't like to schedule their lives at all. Let's meet our guest. Here he is.
Absolutely.
Peter Gaskin. How the devil are you?
I devilishly well, thank you very much.
Oh, good.
You are too.
Yes, good. There's somebody who has got a suitable answer for my catchphrase. Yeah. So the interesting thing about Peter Tercia, I don't know if you've picked up on this yet, but he's a humanist celebrant. And do you know what that is?
Yes, I do. Actually, that means he does marriages, christenings, and am I right to say funerals as well?
Yeah, mainly funerals. I've yet to do a christening, I have to say.
Oh, okay. Well, I suppose christenings are by default religious Christian christening, Christian.
Yeah, the clue is in the name.
What's
he might do baptisms.
Yeah.
He's not going to do christenings because that's for Christians.
Yeah, I love that idea. In fact, I'm on a Facebook group in South Afrikaans group, and there was a post in this week about what do you do if you're non-religious and you know that you've been diagnosed with a terminal disease. How do you prepare for that, and how do you prepare your family? And as a celebrant, your title is a humanist celebrant. And I don't think we do enough. I don't think we do nearly enough as humanists to celebrate life and to celebrate the passing of people from living to non-living and to honor their memories. I'd love you to talk to that.
Yeah, no, it's to be honest, actually, it's my favorite element of what I do for a living. I absolutely love going and meeting families and sometimes meeting people who are nearing the end of their lives. Some people who aren't nearing the end of their lives as well, and talking about their lives and about what it's going to mean when they die, and so on and so forth. It really is a privilege. It really, it's an overused word. I hate using it, but it truly is a privilege to meet people in those circumstances. Really is.
Well, it's good that there's people like you who are prepared to commemorate the milestones of our lives, which previously was all commandeered by the churches. How dare they?
Yeah, there's plenty of room. I still get comment now after funerals, weddings, and naming ceremonies from people who still have a faith, who are surprised how much of the things they hold dear still come across in a secular ceremony. And I find that incredibly satisfying because you have to have meaning in things. And, you know, we've shed loads of meaning without resorting to anything other than reality. So, yeah.
So Peter, I want to ask you, how did you embark on this journey of becoming a humanist celebrant? And my mother tongue is Afrikaans, and we don't have a word for celebrant in Afrikaans, and I think I'll have to think of one and devise one, because I love that word celebrant, because it captures something of the spirit of celebrating life, celebrating humanity, celebrating who we are, and celebrating the memories of those who have passed. And so what was your journey? How did you embark on this journey of becoming a celebrant? And on a bureaucratic note, what does it require to become a celebrant? Do you have to go through some sort of a process? Is there any bureaucratic process involved? And do you have to write an exam? Would you like to enlighten us to that?
Yeah. Well, for humanists, I mean, there are many celebrants. It was quite a shock to me when I became a celebrant how many celebrants there are. But the vast majority are, well, they're celebrants who will offer any sort of service, and, you know, sort of faux religious and what have you, which I, of course, don't do. The training for a humanist celebrant is rigorous and really, it's insightful, it's thoughtful, it's deeply affecting, and collegiate as well. We work in a network, so we're continually sharing ideas, which is wonderful because you're constantly being introduced to new thought and discussing that thought. Yeah, it's very rigorous, and there is a pass and fail. Not everybody gets through. It takes place over several months, and then you're peer reviewed as you go through your career. So people are constantly coming along and looking at my ceremonies, and do they meet the quality criteria that Humanist UK have established? And we have to do that at least every 3 years. And before we get fully accredited, we have to have a qualified celebrant come along and see us in action, as it were. And as I say, every 3 years after that, we get assessed as well. Which it's really good. It's good to be a different perspective. Yeah.
We actually have a common friend, because yes.
Yeah.
Both Tercia and I know Guy Otten, and so
yeah, Guy's a lovely man. I've known him for many years. Actually, I used to work for him when he was a solicitor. Yeah, before either of us sort of thought about humanism, I guess. And I can't speak for Guy. He maybe did, but yes, in Manchester, he had a firm, Otten Penner, and a lovely man. He's involved in lots of charitable endeavours as well, including law centres, and he was on the Mental Health Tribunal in Manchester. Fascinating chap. Yeah, really good.
Well, I can say that in fact, it's just about a year ago exactly. That my son and I, at the very generous sponsorship of my mom and dad, we went to visit my brother who lives in Pontefract in Yorkshire, and we traveled to Manchester, and we spent a whole day with Guy.
Oh,
And
lovely.
it was one of the most memorable days. As far as celebrantism goes, I can't agree with you enough that Guy and his partner, Judy, are two of the nicest people that I've ever met. And I want to talk to you a little bit about this whole idea of being a humanist celebrant and of ceremony, because I know that there's, John, and you will know about this. Sometimes as an atheist, one is branded as being heartless, and you have no emotion, and you sort of cold, rock hard if you're an atheist. And I would like you to talk a little bit to that, Pete, and especially with a focus on how ceremony and ritual is a human characteristic. It doesn't matter whether you're an atheist or whether you're a Christian or a Buddhist or a Hindu. As humans, in my opinion, we need ritual, be it brushing your teeth or taking a bath or drying the dishes. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about the idea of ritual as something that is healthy, and that, in my opinion, has been hijacked by religions. And it shouldn't be like that, because ritual can be practiced without being connected to any form of supernatural belief. And it's actually healthy for human beings to engage in ritual. What would you say to that? And John, I'd like to hear your comment as well.
I've got some. Yes, go ahead, Peter.
Oh, do you not want to put those forward now? Or
Well, I was going to agree with Tercia about the need for ritual, because I think you can see it in other animals. It's not peculiarly human. And if you watch birds' courtship displays, and sometimes, there's a few birds that are loyal to one partner, and they go away, they separate, and then flying hundreds of years, they come back and greet each other, and it's all rather lovely. Also, I wanted to respond to your idea that atheists have been misrepresented as, heartless and purposeless and hateful and all that nasty stuff. And I think the opposite is true. I think that because we don't have this tribalism, we've got no reason to demonize anybody else. But the religious do, if they think they're right and everybody else is wrong. So that's me.
okay, well, first of all, ritual. Obviously, I would say this, wouldn't I? Because it's what I do for a living. I think ritual is incredibly important, and we undervalue ritual in our day-to-day lives nowadays. I guess because we get so distracted with modern needs and materialism and what have you. But I think there are certain elements in life. I talk about weddings and funerals and namings. Those are key life stages, if you like, where ritual becomes very important. And a lot of people need a bit of help when it comes to saying goodbye to somebody who's died, and indeed welcoming somebody into the world when they're born.
These are important events. We need to
hugely important. And I think we lose something if we don't recognize how important those things are. And equally, there are, when COVID was rife, I took part in it was a multi-belief event in Shropshire, where they had erected a COVID stone And there were people from different beliefs who just said a few words. They weren't particularly religious. Said a few words about the stone and what COVID had, how it had impacted upon society. And that was very lovely as well. Another ritual. There we go. That was in Salton Hall. They have a modern day long barrow there, which is lovely. Yeah, really lovely. Where
did you say long barrow?
yes,
Long
yeah.
barrow? Could you, as an analphabetic ignoramus from Africa, could you explain what that is to me, please?
So it's so in Neolithic times, people were, I suppose, mainly important people were buried in chambers, burial chambers, some of which were called long barrows. So there were several people buried in these, and there's sort of stone structures that are underground, and
with a hill on top. They built a mound on top too.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, they built a mound on top, and they had ceremony. I mean, none of us know exactly what places like Stonehenge were for, but there was ritual attached, without doubt, to how people were thinking about the world, trying to understand the world, and commemorating death and life and death.
Well, it needs to be made memorable because, for example, Tercia will know that we had 2 budgericars. I say had because sadly we now only have 1. And my youngest daughter was quite upset, and we had to go through the whole process of digging a hole in the grass and burying this bird and shedding tears, and that's necessary. You've got to come to terms with the facts of life.
Yeah. No, totally.
So Peter, I want to ask you. Mentioned. I'm going to botch this name because I can't do it. Shropshire, as an Afrikaans. But are you familiar? Do you know Dr. Nightingale? He's a neurologist. He's based in Shropshire. He's also a humanist celebrant. Do you perhaps know him?
Yeah, doctor.
Yes.
I know him quite well. Yeah. Yeah.
Please, if you I'll send. He's not good on WhatsApp, but and John, if you can get hold of him via Pete, he would be a wonderful guest. He's one of
would be phenomenal.
He's one of the most amazing people I've known. His son was actually is also a neurologist, and he was a doctor in Cape Town during COVID. And for some bizarre reason, the South African government decided not to extend his work visa. But he was the first humanist celebrant I met, Dr. Simon Nightingale. He actually stayed a night he spent some time with my folks, and we did a little presentation in South Africa. And he was one of the people who I don't want to say exposed me to, but introduced me to the whole idea of humanist celebrants and how important ritual is, and how important is it that in celebrating death, we actually celebrate life. And it's something that I've often spoken about in my smaller circles. And John, we've never spoken about it directly, but just 50 years ago, people used to die in their homes, and death was a natural part of life. But as medical technology advanced, nowadays people die in hospitals, mostly, and we've sanitized death.
Yes.
We've distanced ourselves from the one certainty in life, which is death. And
well, let me tell you something, because recently I actually made a will, and I went to the solicitor, and I said to her, after decades of denial, I finally accepted that I'm going to die. I need to make a will.
Well, please don't, John, just don't go soon. The longer you can stay, the happier many of us will be. So we know it's inevitable, but please hang around a couple years more.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's not part of my plan to die in the next few days.
Please don't.
Good to recognize that it is an inevitability, though.
It is, yes, very much so, yes. And you're right that people used to die at home. People used to get born at home too, didn't they? And it's now a bit more remote because of the hospital thing. Both of my parents died in hospital, and for neither of them was I able to get there in time. So that's not an improvement, is it?
I think it's sadly it's an inevitability with the way we live. But again, we need to find. You see, for me, it's a big part of where I think is wondering what replaces religion, because religion, it is certainly in the Western world, it is going, but it is part of the structure that we have with our lives. And we need things to replace that. And things like life and death are absolutely key to that. We no longer, obviously some people do, but a lot of us no longer go to churches and things of that nature. And you have to wonder what cohesion there is, how we plug those gaps that inevitably emerge when those structures that we were all used to, whether we as individuals like them or not, society was based around a lot of those structures, and they're no longer there.
Yes, that's right. Religion is going, but it is leaving a gap too, because
big gap.
In the past, it was a social service, and it isn't anymore. Already, you hardly see anybody certainly not in an Anglican church. If you go to an Anglican church, you see 7 people, 5 of them are old women, and 2 are old men that the women have dragged along.
Yeah,
so
it does vary. I mean, there are some busy churches, and especially at Christmas, I think a lot of people go whether they have a faith or not, because they like singing carols. And
I've done that because one of my daughters was in the school choir, and they got to perform at Arundel Cathedral, and it's a wonderful venue. And I went along and I sang lustily because, of course, I know all these carols from my own schooling.
John, is that the one that I went to with you, or is that the one? Did we visit when we went there? When I was there last year?
I think I took you to Chichester Cathedral. Did we do Arundel? It's on top of the hill by the castle. Yeah, we may have done. Yeah, we may have. I think we did.
Yeah. And but Peter, I want to ask you about whether you have any ideas about how we can go about getting atheists, because I identify as an atheist, but I prefer to also use the label secular humanist, because the fact that I don't believe in a God doesn't mean that I'm not sentimental. It doesn't mean that I don't love beautiful sunsets. It doesn't mean that I don't get sad when I watch. I mean, I get sad when there's a rugby match and the teams sing "Flower of Scotland." I begin to tear up. So I mean, how can that be? How can I be an atheist when I tear up when the Scotland team sings "Flower of Scotland"? I mean, really. And I think one of the things that I would like to achieve, with amongst other things, being a co-host to FreeThought Hour, is to make people understand that the fact that one doesn't believe in supernatural gods or beings doesn't mean that one doesn't experience deep emotion. And what would you say to that? And what do you think we need to do as humanists? And well, I don't know. Do you identify as a secular humanist or an atheist and a secular humanist? I have no idea. But
that's interesting. Yes, I've got something to contribute here. Let's hear Peter's
Okay.
response first.
Yeah,
Let's hear what Peter
very quickly in response to that, and thank you for that, because it really goes to the heart of why I started getting involved in this stuff. I've been an atheist all my life, but I had some medical issues. I actually died for a few seconds with some heart issues, and it was on the flip side of that that I started thinking about my life and where it was going, and discovered humanism. This was about 7-8 years ago. And I found humanism a positive response to atheism. Atheism, to me, is a denial of a certain way of looking at the world, whereas humanism takes that and makes a positive of it. And all those emotions, Tercia, that you mentioned, they're human emotions. They are nothing to do with anybody's faith or belief, or they are human emotions. And wouldn't it be sad if we didn't get a feeling of utter joy when we see an incredible natural sight like a sunrise or a sunset, or anything in between? That's being human. That's fantastic.
Really, rainbows don't belong to God. Unless he's using them to indicate his support for the LGBTQ people.
Well, she's not very good at that, is she?
Anyway, I wanted to come in here because I, first of all, what was I going to say? This was about atheism and humanism, because a few weeks ago I spoke to Bristol Humanists. I was their guest speaker. And before I delivered my presentation, I said, listen, I may be president of Atheism UK, but I'm also a member of Humanism UK and the National Secular Society. And you see, I don't really want to have any barriers between these organizations. So help me out here. Put your hands up if you lot who are here with your humanist hats on. By the way, we were meeting in an ex-church. Put your hands up if you also consider yourself to be atheists. Okay?
Yeah.
All but 2 put their hands up. And those 2 in the Q&A afterwards, after I'd done my presentation, apologized for not putting their hands up quickly enough. So I wanted to say that. I had something else that went through my head. Oh, yes. You're right about humanism providing more culture than atheism seems to, because you're right, atheism is just no God. It's a lack of God. We're not convinced with the stories that you're telling us, and you don't have any evidence, so we've decided to disbelieve you. That's the bare bones of atheism. But humanism seems to be for atheists who want to be in a club.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure whether that's a good or a bad view of it.
Well, the more sociable ones who want to.
It's certainly a nice. It's nice. I'm always very wary of labels, including atheism, including humanism, because these days when you identify yourself with a label, people seem to assume they know everything about you, and it's not true.
Yes.
So I'm very wary of them. But yeah, for me, humanism does offer a positive way of living life. It's looking at life and it's exploring life in a way perhaps that religious or even pre-religious people looked at life and thought, well, how's the best way that we can deal with this? And what can we get out of this? How can we help each other? All those sort of impulses I think are reflected in humanism, and that's what draws me to it, and I'm sure many other people. Alongside, lots of people have left religion, they've been hurt by religion, and they found a home in humanism because they can talk openly about their experiences and have people who are prepared to listen and offer advice and help and what have you. So it's a human aspect of atheism, if you like.
So I too have had a heart surgery, but I didn't go to the extremes of dying for a few seconds.
No, it's great. I mean, it puts the lie, you only live once. I didn't. I've lived twice.
Yeah. So did you have a near-death experience? Tell us. Do tell us.
I was asked this, and I wish I'd been quicker and made out that I had, but absolutely no.
No.
It's like turning off a light switch, isn't it? It's
Yes.
it is.
That's
It's
right.
simple.
Well, but Peter, and John, I think in the time that we're living at the moment, we labels make life easier. I want to speak a little bit to what you said about labels. I would never just disregard labels, because labels do contribute to making life easier, as long as we always emphasize that labels are just that. They're just labels.
Right, yeah.
And I mean, one could go through life, and I think one should go through life like Idi Amin and have a whole row of labels, because you know,
I'm not sure that he's a good example.
He's not a great example.
Idi Amin is not a good example, except that I like the idea of having lots of labels, because we can identify with more than one label. I can be married, I can be pro transgender, I can be atheist, I can be secular, I can be humanist, I can be African, I can be Afrikaans, I can be female. I can have all of those labels, and I can identify with all of those labels. And I think the positive thing about labels is it helps us to showcase ourselves, as long as everybody remembers that we are not limited by the labels that we choose to wear at any time. And as long as we remember that labels are just that, they're just labels. And in a country like mine, the atheist label is a little bit like being a communist, you know. In fact, if you're a communist, you still, because you can be a Christian communist, which gives you a chance of getting to heaven. But to be an atheist communist, that's bad. But Peter, you said that you've never been religious. So how did you become a celebrant? What was it about? I'm curious, because in my experience, and I'm using labels here, non-religious people are they're not fond of rituals, because rituals are so closely identified with religions. So what was it that, what was it, your health issues and being dead? I'm so glad you're still alive. I'm very happy that you came back to life.
How do you know I'm still alive?
I hope so.
Yes.
Well, if you
The AI avatars are getting very good nowadays.
Deep fake, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, was there anything in particular that made you have you been a humanist celebrant for 7 years now, or how?
Yeah, it's 7 or 8 years since that issue that happened. Yeah.
Okay.
But the reason I got into it is, whilst I haven't had a religion, I've always thought about how we live and about other people. I studied anthropology when I was at uni. I've always been interested in people and how we live. And you know, when you look at how different people live and different rituals around the world, in Africa, South America, and North America, and elsewhere, the commonality is helping people deal with life. And it just struck me as something I would like to get into. I needed to find a different way of earning a living, and went into this sphere of work, and absolutely love it. Especially funerals is by far and away my favorite sphere of ritual. And that encompasses lots of different avenues: memorials, burials, crematoria, lots of different ways of celebrating life and indeed death. Yeah.
The end of life, yes. Well, if you want to hire Peter, I think you could find him at this address. Is that right?
That's quite correct. Thank you.
Good, good. And also, he's a key person in this organization too, chesterhumanist.org.uk.
Yeah.
So you could join that and meet up and do some humanist activities.
Yeah.
Do you have speakers come to your events?
We do. Yeah.
You meet monthly or?
Yeah, we've had numerous speakers. We had when COVID was on, we had Julian Baggini.
I love him.
He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Peter Tatchell talking about free speech. We had a young man who, funny enough, came to one of our walks. We occasionally have walks. There are people who organise walks in the group, and we had a walk in a local park. And this young man came along, Jake, who escaped sounds a bit dramatic, but he did escape from a Jehovah's Witness, a closed Jehovah's Witness community.
Yeah, no, I've just reported on some people who've done that in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And I think escape is entirely appropriate because there's this horrible shunning business.
So shunning, yeah.
So if you take a look at the last edition of Global Atheist News, which went out just before we started live streaming this show, you'll see a report on 2 Jehovah's Witnesses who escaped.
Yeah, no, I should look it out because he's an incredibly impressive young man, trying to rebuild a life away from that community. Yeah,
yes. With nobody, no friends, no family. Start again on your own.
Incredible.
Yes, and they don't have I mean, their schooling is limited. Often, so it's really hard. But Peter, I want to ask you about the process that you go through, especially when you do a burial or a end of life service. So my aunt passed away recently, and I'm in my 50s. Well, no, I'm not in my 50s. No, hell no, I'm 50. I'm 50. My father just turned 74.
Yeah, that's in your 50s. Yeah, you've started. That's in
come
your
on, John, really? No, I'm 50. And if I think about it, okay, let's not go there. But in any case.
I can't even remember my 50s. Chill out.
So my aunt passed away about a month ago. My dad is in his 74. My mom will be 74 soon. So many of my aunts and uncles are in their 70s and 80s. My mother-in-law passed away in 2021. So I'm going into that stage now where people that I know and people that I've known, their lives end. And I'm curious, what is the process that you go through with the family members when you prepare for a humanist a memorial service? Do you call it a burial? Do you call it a memorial service? So, and then maybe you can talk also a little bit to the naming, because that's the beginning of a new life. Oh, and yes, we had another very sad incident in our family. My brother and his wife lost a baby. They had to end a pregnancy at 15 weeks, which was also really sad. And so I'm in that phase of life where I no longer think that I'm invincible. Like my son, who just turned 21, he thinks he's invincible. So what is the process that you go through with those who stay behind? Because after all, memorial services are for those who stay behind, because I presume that, like John and I, you believe that the only thing that remains when our brains stop functioning are the memories of us in the minds of other people who knew us. So
and
I'd like
things we've done in life. So if somebody's written a book, that survives, music survives, all those sort of things. And I also think, and it's really important actually, that, and I often share this in ceremonies, that nobody achieves anything on their own. Everybody is dependent on everybody else.
Yes.
And very often these are people that we never know the names of, but just something little they've done has helped somebody else achieve something which has benefited all of us. And it's an incredibly humbling recognition of the
That's
human.
what it means. That's what it means to be a social animal.
Yes,
we all need help all the time.
We do.
Yes.
Which is what slightly annoys me about this cult of personality that we have around us all the time at the moment, because a lot of people put themselves out as special, and they're really, really not. Some are very clever at certain things, but they forget they're reliant on everybody else. I think I know it's in sub-Saharan Africa. You've got the Ubuntu concept, and it's really, really true, and very powerful, I think.
It's my country. Ubuntu is it's a Zulu word, Ubuntu, which means Bantu means person, and Ubuntu means people. So the concept of Ubuntu means we are one, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is where the idea of it takes a village to raise a child came from, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, which is often slightly overused in our naming ceremonies, of course, and things of that nature. But yeah, in terms of what you asked, Tertia, in terms of when I meet a family who are grieving, essentially what I offer is a listening ear and encourage them to talk about the person who's died, not to hide them away, but to actively talk about and remember their lives, and remember what the impact they had on, the people they leave behind, as it were. And it's incredibly powerful. That's probably my favorite part of the whole process, is when I meet family and go through that, and without question, everybody finds it a cathartic experience. They love it, and it's very helpful. But namings, again, you're meeting a family, but it's all with naming ceremonies. It's all about the future, isn't it? There's a little bit about the past, but it's all about the future. That's really, really uplifting. And I think weddings in a similar way, very uplifting. It's about the future. It's about people coming together, and I think helping each other achieve what they want to achieve in life. That's a wonderful thing to do. Whatever the couple, what their backgrounds are, if they're helping each other achieve what they want to achieve, that's an absolutely wonderful thing. Does that sort of answer your question? What's involved?
It does, and I particularly like the idea of that you say that before you get to the ceremony and the ritual, you're an ear to you possibly give voice to the grief, and you're just there to listen. So this might be, I don't know, I have a very dark British sense of humor, I like to believe. So I'll tell you this story, and you can comment on that. So when my grandfather was 80 something when he died, and he had a stroke, and the last couple of months of his life were really it wasn't easy on my mom and my dad. I was away at university at that time, so I wasn't really involved, but in our church, we were religious at that time, and in our church there was a couple who was it was a small congregation, so everybody knew everybody, and this particular couple, they were very serious and very religious, and they knew my grandfather better than they knew my mom. So this is my mom's dad I'm talking about, and when my granddad passed, they came to pay their condolences. And my mom wanted to say, but these were people she didn't know really well, and they were very serious, and they took life really, really seriously, and humor was absolutely no laughing matter. And they came to pay their condolences to my mom, and my mom wanted to say, thank you, we appreciate your condolences. And it came out completely wrong. And so I'm translating this, it was in Afrikaans, but my mom ended up saying, thank you very much, we are enjoying it. and as she uttered the words, thank you very much, we enjoy it, instead of we appreciate it, she started laughing. And this couple, they were totally devastated that my mom could be laughing while she's burying her father. And so I kind of like that idea that obviously my mom was not in any way trying to make fun of anybody, and she was grieving the loss of the passing of her father. But you know, death is part of life. And I always like this idea. And in fact, it's a very African thing that where you have after a funeral, there's a massive party.
Yes. It's not just African.
No,
Irish as well.
That's quite common. Yeah, that's quite common.
Do you get involved in wakes, Peter?
I never go to wakes, because who wants the awkward guy in the corner to have to entertain?
Right.
But I love the wakes. I always try and inject humor into the ceremony. You know, we're not human without a little bit of humor.
No, indeed.
I think it's a lovely thing that people can laugh and smile and what have you at the point of death. I hope people do when I die. It'd be wonderful.
Yes, indeed. So do you think that doing these sort of ceremonies, you need to have some sort of natural aptitude? Is it a personality thing? Do you think that like a doctor needs to have a bedside manner that is difficult to teach? Do you think that there's some people who are naturally good at this sort of thing and others who could never handle it?
Well, quite possibly, but it wouldn't be for me to comment. And I've certainly met a number of doctors who don't have a particularly good bedside manner. So I think we're all different, and different people will connect with different people in different ways. And you know, celebrancy is one of those jobs that a lot of people think they can do. And on the face of it, that's a truism. But when you experience the actuality of celebrancy, you realize very quickly, and families certainly realize, that it isn't something that everybody can do. And I know celebrants who have been, not humanist ones, who have been turned away from families because they have adopted the wrong approach. They haven't approached the family in the right way. I would probably be turned away if I wasn't, if it was a family who were after religion. And if, I do occasionally get families who are wanting religion, and I respectfully pass them to colleagues who are of that mind. I wouldn't try and pretend, whereas some celebrants do, unfortunately. Not here ones, but.
Well, here's a little story, because a friend of mine, his mother died, and at the time I was friendly with a pastor, a local evangelical pastor. And so I had he was asking for advice as to who might conduct a suitable, because he's a devout atheist. So he was asking how he might conduct a suitable service to say goodbye to her. And I think she was being cremated, and she herself was quite a godly person. So there was a sort of a tightrope to walk there. Yeah. Some of the people who were attending would be religious. Anyway, I said to my pastor friend, do you think you could handle this? Do you think you could deliver something which is sort of secular, that doesn't offend anybody? And he said, yeah, I could have a go at that. And he did, but according to the report I got from my friend, whose mother it was they were burying or cremating, he slipped into autopilot and started delivering Bible passages or something.
Good grief. Yeah. Well, I must say, yeah. Sorry, Josie.
No, my.
No. The ceremonies we do are always inclusive. We always, I mean, it's a funny thing that a secular, I believe a secular ceremony can be more inclusive than a religious ceremony.
Sure.
And I think families these days are very much more complex than they ever used to be. So people have lots of different ways of looking at the world. And I think a humanist ceremony offers a way of, it offers a way of dealing with that, because it's not judgmental. Really not judgmental, and we always allow space if there are people who have a faith. We allow space for that to be expressed with a silent prayer or whatever fashion people need. Where we draw the line is we wouldn't lead prayers and things like that at all. That would be hypocritical and wrong, and a bit uncomfortable from my point of view. So it's I honestly believe humanism offers a more inclusive and genuinely inclusive way forward.
Do you ever make use of Bible passages, or do you make use of quotes? Do you have any particular sources that you like to?
All sorts. Going back to ancient Greece and to the Romans, we often quote Cicero and people and Aristotle, people of that ilk, but also modern day Philip Pullman, a humanist writer. He's done some lovely phraseology around continuing life in blades of grass and million leaves and things like that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's lovely. And there's I often use well, not often, but sometimes there's a poem. I use a shame of me, I forget the author, but it's often been attributed to Mary Elizabeth Fry. It isn't. It's sometimes the Navajo indigenous peoples, and it isn't. It's somebody else whose name has gone, but it's wonderful, and it's talking about how we live on in the physical world, how our atoms get recycled, how our energy gets recycled, and that just fills me with absolute fantastic sense of connectedness to the rest of the natural world, and I absolutely love it, and that exudes through any ceremony I do, really. So sadly, you do something where there's no family, there's no one. It's sad. It's sad.
Have you ever conducted a ceremony, especially an end of life, or do you call them burials? What do you call them? Do you call them funerals?
Burial. Yeah, people are buried.
Have you ever done a ceremony where you became emotionally overwhelmed? And has that ever happened? And what do you do when that happens? I imagine, when an old person dies, you sort of, I can imagine myself feeling, they've had their innings, and I just read about a 103-year-old lady who had ear piercings done because when somebody dies at 103 or 104, I mean, really, but when a young person dies, when a child dies, how do you cope with that, and how do you deal with that type of ceremony? Have you ever conducted those?
Babies, young people, young adults, lots of them, and they are more difficult. You're quite right than people who've lived a full life. But it's my job to deal with them.
Yes.
And so I do, and occasionally I have to pause.
Yes.
I do. I do choke on my own words sometimes.
Yes, you would. Yes.
Yeah, have to take a deep swallow, and
you'd have to be a very hard person not to. Well,
Yeah.
we're coming up to the end of our time here, but because we've got 3 atheists, 3 heathens who don't believe in an afterlife or heaven, I'm going to lighten the mood by playing this clip. You'll enjoy.
That's not the end for me, sir. It's just the beginning. I have served my human masters, and now I can look forward to my reward in Silicon Heaven. Silicon what? Surely you've heard of Silicon Heaven.
Has it got anything to do with being stuck opposite Bridget Nielsen in a packed lift?
It's the electronic afterlife. It's the gathering place for the souls of all electrical equipment. Robots, calculators, toasters, hairdryers. It's our final resting place.
I don't mean to say anything out of place here, Crichton, but that is completely wacko, Jacko. There is no such thing as Silicon Heaven.
Well, then where do all the calculators go?
They don't go anywhere. They just die.
But surely you believe that God is in all things. Aren't you a pantheist?
Yeah, but I just don't think it applies to kitchen utensils. I'm not a frying pan theist. Machines do not have souls. Computers and calculators don't have an afterlife. You don't get hairdryers with tiny little wings sitting on clouds playing harps.
But of course you do. For is it not written in the electronic Bible, the iron shall lie down with the lamp? Oh, it's common sense, sir. If there weren't a better life to look forward to, why on earth would machines spend the whole of their lives servicing humankind? Now that would be really dumb.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Silicon Heaven.
Don't be sad, Mr. David, sir. I am going to a far, far better place.
Just out of interest, is Silicon Heaven the same place as human heaven?
Human heaven? Goodness me. Humans don't go to heaven. No. Someone just made that up to prevent you from all going nuts.
Isn't that brilliant?
I've not seen it before. It's very good.
Haven't you?
John, I'm disappointed.
What?
I was hoping for something like, always look on the bright side of life.
No, I don't have that.
Which gets played remarkably often at funerals.
Yes, it does. Yes. I'm already choosing my music list, and I'm going to include The Road to Hell.
Yeah, that's
anyway, I love the line in that clip. It's a play on the biblical words, isn't it? The iron shall lie down with the lamp.
Yeah, that was clever.
Well, yes. I would like to take the last 30 seconds of my time on the Free Thought Hour to say thank you so much, Peter. It was lovely to talk to you. And in view of the phase of life that I'm in with relatives passing on, and
it's all downhill now.
It's all downhill, but you know what? Always look on the bright side of life. And thank you so much for your time. It was lovely to chat to you. John, it was nice to see you again. And I'm going to say, well, we have about, 1.5 minutes left. I just want to say that just because we don't believe in gods or goddesses doesn't mean that we don't appreciate life. In fact, I think that many atheists, especially if they also identify as secular humanists, life becomes so much more precious when one realizes that every single day is a gift. Yeah. And that it can pass at any moment. And these days, since I've become non-religious, I find myself, when I greet my children, when I greet my parents, when I greet my friends, I make a point of saying to them, I appreciate you. I'm so glad you're in my life. Yeah, yeah. And I want to finish with that. Don't ever let a moment pass without saying that you appreciate the ones in your life that enrich your life and make life a better place to be in. Thank you, John. Thank you, Peter. I'm saying goodbye.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, this is not a rehearsal. There is no second life. So we've got to make this one count. Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. You've been fantastic. And if I can find it, I'm going to play the outro. Yeah, here we go. I've made one specially for you. So thank you, viewers, future and past. And we've got to talk, Tercia, about who we're going to put on our guest list in future. So stay with me, okay?
I will.
Bye-bye. Say bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.